wanted to believe they even existed. And when the truth finally dawns, it dawns in fire. But there's one they fear. In their tongue, he's Dovahkiin, Dragonborn.
Okay. I get it. Alright, I get it. Trust me. This is my 5th video about Freddy since August. The 6th if you count the video about M1 killers. I promise I'm not obsessed with the man. Please, do not tell my therapist that I cannot stop talking about Freddy Krueger. While yes, my constant need to bang on about what is essentially the worst killer Dead by Daylight has ever seen is perhaps not exactly something a lot of people understand, but I just can't help but be incredibly interested in the winner of the Deadpool lookalike contest, because he's not only one of the most iconic horror characters, but he's got a podium finish with Ghostface and Candyman when it comes to my personal favorite horror characters. So, while most people aren't as interested in it as I am, there's so much about him, not only in the films, but in Dead by Daylight that is worth talking about. His history in DBD is just so wild. Being a Freddy main must be like being on a roller coaster, except the roller coaster has a ramp of about 3 feet before you plummet into a bottomless pit. Hey, you're on a ride, but it's going down for the past 3 years straight, and also the guy next to you just got a huge buff, and now suddenly you have no good add-ons and you have no drip. Alright, that metaphor got away from me, but well, I just find it so baffling that Freddy has been at the absolute bottom of the tier list not once, but twice. He's the undisputed champion of being dog-ass, and that championship reign is long enough to make Roman Reigns blush. Point is, Freddy is terrible. He's been terrible for most of his time in Dead by Daylight, but we now know that Freddy is scheduled for an update in January. My first ever proper video was, funnily enough, talking about Sharpan Joe himself, and while that video isn't exactly one of my best, it's still something I'm happy I made. Instead of linking that video in the description and then having credits for the next few minutes, I want to be a bit more ambitious than I was, so to start things off, let's identify what it is that makes Freddy so bad. We'll break his power down into 4 sections and talk about each of them before we move on to the fun stuff. The first and most prevalent part of Freddy's kit is the Dream World. This is the most important part of Commander Kruger's kit because it holds the entire thing together. Think of it as the foundation of the rickety, termite-infested house that is the Nightmare in 2024. Inside the Dream World, survivors are given the Oblivious status effect, giving Freddy a subpar stealth effect that can be used in tandem with perks like Unforeseen to create some chaotic moments in the match if the survivors aren't paying perfect attention. For the most part, Freddy's stealth isn't really anything worth focusing on with his current kit. The most important part of the Dream World is that outside of it, Freddy is completely powerless. And while this may seem strange and counterproductive, I always thought of Freddy as a reverse Wraith. Wraith can get a relatively free first hit because the survivor doesn't realize he's there unless they are paying attention. Freddy, on the other hand, well, the survivor gets a blasting terror radius warning and he has no way to get a fast hit. However, once the survivor has been hit or gradually falls asleep, then the hits, on paper, should be much easier. The most important bit about what I just said is that it only works like that on paper. In reality, the Dream World currently means really nothing. The main thing is that with the introduction of the visual heartbeat, Freddy's stealth in the Dream World was made completely irrelevant. While survivors already had the audio cues of him being near, now they have a very clear showing of just how close the man of their dreams is. The only thing Freddy has going for him is that he is such a small, frail, little man that he can occasionally be mistaken for a survivor if someone is completely clueless. This is something I'll address here in a few minutes though. So you may be asleep and in his world, but Freddy is just so toothless right now, and why is that? Well, the Nightmare has 2 separate chase powers that he can choose between, Dream Snares and Dream Pallets, and while, again, this may sound like a strong kit, some of the best killers in the game today have multiple powers. Dracula, for example, has 2 anti-loops as well as a movement ability, and if you knew nothing about Freddy, you'd think that he would be somewhat similar to our good friend Vlad. But Freddy has to choose between the Snares or the Pallets, he can't use both of them. Well, that's okay, surely both of these powers are equally strong, at the very least, one of them is good, right? Wrong. Pallets are incredibly fun, but anyone who has the memory of a 3-year-old can remember that their teammate dropped the Shack pallet 5 minutes ago, so the Shack pallet being up is oddly suspicious. The pallets are limited as well, despite how weak of a power it is. You can only have 7 fake pallets on a map, which is a ludicrously low number for how many pallets can be on a map total. The Dream Snares, on the other hand, are theoretically pretty strong, however, Freddy takes a heavy slowdown when placing a snare, and if he decides to do this, then essentially he has placed a smaller clown bottle that loses him distance if the survivor does not trigger it. You can recycle the traps, which means trying to use them as a trap is practically useless. The only real way to use them is exactly like you would a clown bottle. Put one on one side of the loop, put one on the other side of the loop, force them one way to trigger one snare, and then either hit them or force them to drop the pallet. Either way, you've technically gotten value, but you're just playing bad clown. However, even the value you got is meaningless in the long run, because if the survivors are pre-dropping each pallet they get to, the generators are just popping one after another. Dream pallets are just pretty weak and a gamble. Snares are more reliable, but not enough to accomplish anything against most players, leaving you as one of the most pure M1 killers in the game, which, if you've seen my M1 killer video, you know how I feel about the current state of most M1 killers. The last part of Freddy's kit is Dream Projection. Now don't get excited because this is one of the worst teleport abilities in the game. Let's switch gears for just a second. At the time this video releases, we were given the Houndmaster, who can send Snug to generators to create a pathway for her to follow. Now that part of her power has nothing to do with Freddy. The annoying thing is that the Houndmaster can also send her dog to finished generators. This is something that Freddy just cannot do. So let's recap here. Freddy was given the ability to teleport to generators after his rework in 2019. However, he was not allowed to teleport to a finished generator. Now, in November of 2024, we have a new killer that has similar enough power that can have a movement ability to go towards generators that are finished. Not only that, but during the endgame, she can send the dog to check on exegates too. This isn't just power creep, this is power creep to a character that was already terrible. Not a character going from being strong to being a little bit weaker with the introduction of a character with similar abilities. This is a character that is already bad and is now even worse. Houndmaster's search mode makes Freddy's Dream Projection actually worthless. Surely, with such a weak base kit, Freddy has strong add-ons, right? Well, this is my Freddy add-on tier list, and while he has S tier add-ons on the list, compare these with most other killers' best add-ons, and it's not even close. Z-Block should arguably just be a base kit mechanic. All it does is give killer instinct for survivors that are within 16 meters of a generator you project to for 6 seconds. That's the entire add-on. Freddy's add-on catalog is just so worthless that these are his best add-ons almost by default. Granted, the red paintbrush is actually a pretty solid add-on and makes Freddy go from the worst killer in the game to maybe better than Skull Merchant. His add-ons were gutted due to a playstyle that was genuinely miserable called Forever Freddy. Look that up on YouTube, kids. But since then, he has had no love given to him by behavior, leaving him with a weak power and weak add-ons. But even with all this being said, it's not even the worst part of Freddy. Weak killers are still popular. I mean, Ghostface is one of the worst killers in the game and still has a high pick rate. Up until the last patch, Myers was fighting with Freddy for the bottom spot, but he was still popular. Trapper, Legion, Sadako, and more all have dedicated mains. There are a few notable exceptions, but the majority of the Dead by Daylight player base does not play Freddy. He has had an incredibly low pick rate according to Nightlight, which, to be fair, only is able to record stats that the players report themselves. So it's not a complete picture. But it does start to show something that you can assume carries over the entire player base. And it doesn't fit, because Freddy is one of the most beloved, recognizable horror characters of all time, besides maybe Ghostface or Myers, or maybe even the Xenomorph. I personally think he's the most identifiable character in the game, so surely people would have a special place in their heart for him. Well, it doesn't help that the adaptation of Freddy we got was from the terribly received 2010 remake of Nightmare on Elm Street, where he was portrayed by Jackie Earle Haley, which, to be fair to Jackie, he was actually pretty good in that movie, just bad writing. But I think this could widely be pushed aside, because a lot of people who play Dead by Daylight probably don't even realize this. I mean, a lot of the people who play think that Ghostface we have is one of the killers from Scream, so I don't think that casting blame solely on Jackie is fair. The clearer and much more reliable reason as to why Freddy is so rare is very simple. He's just very, very boring for a lot of people. He's an M1 killer with no additional power. He has no fun movement, no high-octane anti-loop, no impressive text to do, nothing. He is just a man with a glove and an extremely stylish hat. And while I personally will always enjoy playing Freddy, simply because of the fact that Nightmare on Elm Street is my favorite horror franchise, and the vibes of being the Dream Demon will always be there for me, I am absolutely in the minority of the community. Now, to circle back to something I said I would talk about earlier in the video, Freddy's kill rate. A lot of this can be chalked up to the need to do a secondary objective, in my opinion. Newer players are more than likely to be scared of the dream world, so they'll spend more time waking up than players who are more aware, and that boosts his kill rate in the lower spectrum of the MMR ladder. Freddy stomps on new players because he is incredibly easy to play, making it easier for new killers to understand him, while new survivors are more than likely to make mistakes, so I think him having a high kill rate against new players can be leveled out by making him a bit more complex and interesting to play. So, let's get to it then. These are my hopes, and honestly more copium, for the Freddy changes coming at the beginning of the year. I do want to say that I am not a game developer, and I know that simply saying this stuff is a lot easier than actually implementing it. This video is more about entertainment, as well as provoking conversations with my community and the general Dead by Daylight community as a whole. I have no delusions of anything I suggest being part of the Freddy's changes coming in the new year. So, when I first looked at this, I aimed to address each of Freddy's problems and fix them. Starting off with that rickety foundation, we're going to try and rebuild it. The dream world right now accomplishes nothing. Survivors do not care about being asleep, so we need to incentivize people to wake up. Once in the dream world, survivors will have their auras revealed to the nightmare once they are outside his lullaby. This was part of Freddy's original kit before he was reworked, and thematically it makes sense because it's his world. He should absolutely know where you are unless he is actively hunting you. To pair with this, for every survivor that is in the dream world, Freddy's lullaby radius is reduced by 4 meters, meaning that if all 4 survivors are asleep, the nightmare will be given aura reading outside of a 16-meter radius. This is an extremely strong effect, but to help alleviate this, survivors can now wake up at any clock around the map. However, it gradually spikes up each time you wake up. This will start at 3 seconds. After you do this twice, it will double to 6 seconds and continue on that pattern, meaning that after your 4th time waking yourself up at a clock, it will take 12 seconds where it would cap out, meaning that it would take no longer than 12 seconds ever. This rewards a good nightmare player for juggling survivors and keeping them asleep, while also incentivizing team play between survivors by waking each other up instead of using the clocks. We flipped the way waking up works, so now being woken up by a teammate stays at a static 6 seconds, while waking yourself up goes to 12 seconds. This is meant to prevent 2 survivors from doing anything to progress the game for 6 seconds if one is asleep, and 12 seconds if both are asleep. We will also reduce the sleep protection timer from 30 seconds to 20. This means that if a survivor is woken up by a clock, they are protected for 80 seconds instead of 90, unless the nightmare hits them after them 20 seconds. Adrenaline will automatically wake a survivor up because that literally happens in the 2010 film. However, they aren't given protection from sleeping again, meaning one hit from the nightmare or after 50 seconds they will fall asleep. We keep the lullaby similar to how it is now, because as much as the visual heartbeat was of a nerf to Freddy's stealth potential, players that are hard of hearing should not be punished for that. I will take that nerf if even just one person gets to enjoy the game more. These changes will make the dream world a terrifying place to be, making survivors want to get out of it as soon as they can. If played well by Freddy though, he can continuously juggle people in and out of the dream world to keep them running to alarm clocks or to another teammate. I'm not sure if I wanted to make the last survivor unable to fall asleep, because that would make the in-game genuinely impossible to win for the last survivor due to the aura reading. So in the end, I decided to make it so that you cannot fall asleep if you are the last survivor alive. As for Freddy's chase power, we're going to keep the Dream Pallets. While these are a worse add-on than Dream Snares, it's just a more creative and interesting power. However, since these aren't very good, we're going to introduce something else to help Freddy out in these chases. Introducing what I call Dream Shade. If you've played Apex Legends, you're probably familiar with everyone's favorite sex icon, Mirage. He can send out a decoy to try and bamboozle other legends in order to get a drop on them. The idea is that the Nightmare plays an animation that sends a clone of himself out, moving in a straight line towards the area where he sent it for 20 meters or until it hits an object. You can point at the ground to cause the fake Freddy to stand still. These decoys do not have a red stain, and for the first 2 seconds of their existence, it will flicker in and out, similar to how Freddy does when he is further away from an awake survivor. After those 2 seconds, he will stand where he was directed, making breathing noises as well as playing Freddy's idle animation. The idea with these is to use them to confuse survivors for a moment and take advantage of the confusion to get a hit. You can also use this to trick them into thinking you are the Dream Shade if you have a perk to make you undetectable, since it removes your red stain. Focusing in on the trickster aspect of Freddy leans more into the original films, giving him a bit more personality for players to enjoy. At the same time, the only changes we make to Dream Projection is to make Freddy's Dream Projection cooldown a static 30 seconds, instead of fluctuating between 45 and 27 seconds. And biggest of all, for his teleport, allow Freddy to teleport to a finished generator as well as teleporting to an exit gate. For the animation, it can be something as simple as the lever of the gate is pulled down, blood spews out, and Freddy phases through the gate itself facing towards the map. These changes are intended to make Freddy feel better to play, but not make him an incredibly overpowered killer. Even with these changes, you may notice that his base power didn't change much with the exception of the Dream Shade and how playing against him on Survivor works, and even for that, it's based off a recycled idea from his old kit. The Dream Pallets and Dream Shade change from what is the weakest anti-loop killer in the game into a relatively weak but more engaging anti-loop killer. The main point of this rework idea was to make Freddy moderately stronger and to give him more skill expression by tricking survivors. Now, for a lightning round, here's some ideas for some add-ons. If you understand the references to the Nightmare movies I'm making, I love you. The Power Glove. This is an iridescent add-on that will allow the Nightmare to create 2 separate Dream Shades and have them deployed at the same time. After 15 seconds, the Dream Shade fades and returns to the Nightmare. Wizard Master's Cloak. This is a very rare add-on that will automatically replace broken pallets with Dream Pallets after 25 seconds. Manually placing a Dream Pallet will replace the oldest pallet on the map. Slashed Hockey Mask. This is a rare add-on that hides the auras of alarm clocks to survivors once they are asleep. Catherine's Certificate. This is a very rare add-on that removes the flickering effect from the Dream Shades completely. That's the end of our lightning round of add-ons. I just wanted to make some cute references to some of my favorite horror movies of all time. So that's all. Personally, I think it's pretty funky, and it shows what I personally enjoy in a licensed killer. Tricking survivors has always been fun to me, and that's what his entire chase power focuses on. Can you imagine how funny it could be if a survivor panicked and dropped a Dream Pallet onto a Dream Shade that was walking by? It'd be amazing. But anyways, let me know what you think of this idea in the comments. Like I said earlier, I realize that saying all this is absolutely much easier than actually implementing it, but I hope it at least sounds fun. I also know this is not going to be what behavior changes about Scary Terry, but it is what it is. If you enjoyed the video, please do leave a like. For you, it's just a button, but for me, it helps a lot. We're trying to hit 1,000 subscribers before the end of the year, so if you'd like to help out with that, I'd be very thankful. I have plenty of videos for you to watch at this point. I get stuff out multiple times a week. My community Discord and Twitch are linked in the description if you'd like to hang out with us. But with all that out of the way, this is by far my longest video, so let's just wrap it up at this point. My name is Kasir, and I hope I'll see you next time. Until then, I hope you have a fantastic day. Bye-bye.